Greetings everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending upon where you are today. This webinar is about the 5 principles to application lifecycle management with SpiraTeam. My name is Dr. Sriram Rajgopalan. I have my doctoral degree in organizational management, MBA in management, master's in computer engineering, and a bachelorate in electronics and communication engineering. I started as a software engineer several years back and moved along in my career journey as a team leader, business analyst, project manager, scrum master, agile coach, and at the director and vice president levels. I have a number of certifications: portfolio management, program management, project management, scrum master, speaker, writer, author, and so many different things that I do. And I also have experience teaching in several colleges in the US, India, and Vietnam. Today's webinar is part of the 5-part series on Journey into Agile with Inflectra. Each webinar is 1 hour long. We will reserve time at the end for questions. The webinars introduce the concept using a tool. There is some expectation on your part to set up access with SpiraTeam. The completion certificate is based on specific requirements and passing a certification quiz. The Agile by Inflectra certificate goes this way. You first register for the webinar and then you attend them. Now, for reasons beyond our control, if you are not able to attend them, you view the archive when it becomes available. Experiment with SpiraTeam, some of those features we talk about. Take and pass the quiz, and repeat this process for all the 5 webinars. Once you have met all the eligibility requirements, you will get the certificate at appropriate time. And there is a frequently asked questions that we have prepared, and you will see the link to that. And in that particular link, we have answered most of the frequently asked questions. Journey into Agile with Inflectra has 5 parts. And the first webinar is focusing on the 5 principles to application lifecycle management. We will then move on to mastering 4 ceremonies to deliver Agile projects better. We will also focus on 5 essentials to master to manage your requirements better. And we will move into cutting the cost and improving the quality. And finally, we will talk about excellence through reporting in Agile projects. Now, before we move forward, we need to get grounded. Often, when people hear about application lifecycle management, they interpret the terminology with things they know. Project managers or scrum masters will think of the current scope of the project or the specific iteration or release that has a known scope and a relatively short duration. Business analysts, product managers, and product owners think of the product lifecycle management that has an uncertain scope and unclearly long duration. Architects, designers, developers, and testers focus on software development lifecycle. Operations service delivery team members and program and portfolio managers think of the deployment considerations, release documentation, and benefit realization. Now, combine all these chaotic misinterpretations with each business group's or individual's preference to one specific tool based on their comfort zone or opinions. We have just created a perfect storm. This storm manipulates itself as requirements are in different places, tasks are in one place, test cases are incomplete, and the list goes on. So the result is the single source and central source of truth to what the customer wanted and what we delivered is open for misinterpretation. The concept of application lifecycle becomes murkier because all problems are treated like the same nail and the same hammer is used to solve everything. The total cost of ownership for the organization becomes high. Needless to say, like any perfect storm leaving a trail of wreckage, the lack of applying important principles to application lifecycle management in any tool leaves a trail of failed projects. So is Agile a panacea? Often people jump onto the Agile bandwagon and think all their cure has arrived. In fact, whether people do plan-driven project management or Agile approaches to managing projects or a combination of hybrid approaches, the problems continue to remain if we don't understand the 5 principles that need to be in place for any tool of choice to manage the application lifecycle. Let us review the latest State of Agile survey published by version 1. This is an industry-agnostic global survey where several hundred members shared their input on the reasons for going Agile. Perhaps because of the short time focus on iterative and incremental delivery, 75% of the industry says accelerating software delivery is the reason for going Agile. But if time is fixed and scope is variable, only 46% of the people claim increased software quality. What good is a software without adequate quality? Agile's claim to success was also that it allowed change compared to a plan-driven approach. Only when stakeholders are properly managed to control change, this claim can be true. That management of stakeholders is not associated only with Agile. Don't you think so? In fact, despite 64% of the industry's claim to using Agile as a framework to manage changing priorities, only 55% claim productivity increases and 49% see Agile as just a means to align business and IT. So just going to Agile is not going to be a solution. People, process, and technology has to be integrated around the value proposition. The tool of choice across this people and process should enable this change. So what should application lifecycle management cover? The application lifecycle management covers project management phases, and particularly inside them, it focuses on how projects are initiated, planned, executed, monitored, and controlled, and finally closed. It should also support the product management phases, which include a discovery, definition, and design, construction, marketing, training, and launch. It should further focus on the software development lifecycle, and it should focus on analysis, design, build, test, and deploy. So application lifecycle management is not specific to one framework, but it should encompass all the 3 frameworks we listed here. Now, there are 5 principles of application lifecycle management, and I call this a stage. These challenges illustrated earlier in incorporating all these frameworks is not new. With the implementation of several tools that address some but not all these frameworks, several lessons have been learned. Yet the reason for their recurrence is often due to the lack of learning the required lessons these failures have taught us. Regardless of the framework used in project management, product management, or software development, if the software products evolving from any of these projects has to add value, the principles of stage apply. I created this stage principle based on my experience, and it is an acronym standing for services, traceability, auditability, governance, and engineering. Any tool of choice should therefore provide the single source of truth integrating all these 5 principles. Let's explore these elements now. Now, these principles are also framework agnostic, therefore should apply to all the frameworks we mentioned. They are not sequential. They also apply to all business units in an organization. So what does governance involve? Governance involves primarily strategic benefits. Now, when we mean strategic benefits, we are focusing on what does the customer want. The next one is going to be the coordinated planning. How do we prioritize and deliver both customer and business value? Now, as we are coordinating the planning of the strategic benefits, how we deliver them, we also need to focus on the complex interdependencies. This would mean how we go about managing ongoing dependencies and risks to delivery. As we continue to do this, we focus on deliverable integration. This deals with how we continuously build, adjust, and deliver. Finally, when we do all these things, we have to have a reasonable cadence. That is the optimized pace. How we go about sustaining operations along with the delivery of new functionality. And the governance should enable this decision making and impact assessment throughout the product as well as project lifecycle. Now, the next step is going to be traceability. Now, what does that mean? It's the degree of relationship between two or more components of the software developed. The common myth is that traceability is a one-way flow between requirements and test cases. It is not. Any tool should support a bidirectional flow between requirements and test cases. Traceability also should provide and report a seamless interdependency across all the project and product artifacts. Traceability is also related to the binary we have deployed to the test and production environment, to requirements to the binary. Traceability therefore promotes a number of things such as transition planning, succession planning, change impact analysis, test optimization, and product component reuse. Now, to promote the tight traceable coupling across the project artifacts and different types of users interfacing with the product, the V model of software development incorporating verification and validation has been in place for several decades. Starting with the development, the engineer is responsible for the modular design and ensuring there are proper unit test frameworks to confirm the requirements are being met. As we develop multiple modules, the system should be working together, and that is the integration testing, and that needs to be done by a tester, automated or manual. As we try to incorporate a number of systems working together, the system specifications have to be tested by an architect along with the tester. Now, this system level of testing is actually looking into additional things like performance, health check, sustainability, and all those things in near production environment. As we move to the next level, the exact business requirements that we started with have to be accepted by the business users by doing what is called user acceptance testing. As we move to the final level, several extended business users that interface with the reason for this particular product's or project's existence, as documented in the business case, has to do some kind of release testing to ensure that all their operations are properly incorporated and addressed. This produces a lot of challenges to engineering, both from a theoretical perspective as well as from a practical perspective. Now, people often mix product development framework with many other frameworks. So the product development framework like Agile can be combined with project management frameworks like PMBOK and Prince2 and deliver solutions. But when we mix these frameworks, in addition, the software development framework, several confusions arise. And some of the common myths involve how we adapt practices rather than how we adapt the tool. And these practices lead to the incorrect use or non-use or abuse of a tool. Some of these myths include the software development lifecycle involves a linear approach to software development. The big upfront requirements gathering has to be done in SDLC. And doing so saves a lot of cost. Project management is nowhere near part of the software development. There needs to be a high degree of software development before any work can be initiated. Customers see the work after all work is delivered and developed. Testers need not be involved early in the requirement stage. These are some of the major myths. Now, when you look at the original proposition by Royce for the software development lifecycle, you can see how these things have been misinterpreted. He did not recommend the waterfall approach. In fact, he concluded that this linear approach would be a sure recipe for failure and recommended feedback loops. In fact, he recommended a visual inspection of design and development by a second party who neither contributed to the design or development. And that feedback loop is actually defeating the original concept that we all think linear waterfall approach. Royce further went ahead and said we need to have a double feedback loop where skip level feedback is considered. And this double feedback loop basically meant if testing failed, we don't go to the coding levels, we also skip one level and go to the program design. Similarly, if design is faulty or it's unstable, then we don't go to the analysis, we actually go back to the software requirements that we collected. So as we move forward, what are some of the things the application lifecycle tool should support? So an application lifecycle tool is not just development, because that means we are focusing only on an integrated development environment to actually develop work. But it should be an engineering interface. Now, what does those things mean? First of all, it should focus on source code management. Any tool that supports application lifecycle should integrate management and technical processes in the development process. Decision making from governance, therefore, should be integrated with traceability across the development lifecycle, and source code management is definitely one way to do that. The next part is going to be the version control. While source code manages supporting at the coding level, version control aspect of the application lifecycle management tool facilitates creating a software build with multiple versions based upon the actual files brought together to build the resulting software. Then comes the quality management. The reactive and product-based focus of quality is the quality control. The tool of choice should enable what defects are coming from the existing build and resolved in subsequent builds. What potential test cases are flagged for an update based on changes in the requirement is also part of an application lifecycle management tool. While it does all these things, it should also remove the subjectivity in quality control by incorporating a proactive and process-based focus on quality for quality assurance. So the ALM tool should provide this interface to governance using proper workflow. Then comes testing. The nature of business is that there will always be certain aspects of the business requirements that need manual testing or automated testing. Productivity gains result from continuously doing automated testing. A good application lifecycle management tool should provide this interface to both manual and automated testing. Finally, last but not the least, a good deployment is also important. Finally, last but not the least, a good deployment is also not only focusing on the training and documentation necessary, but also facilitating them to provide interface to requirements. Some of these may be non-functional requirements that provide better quality of care in the production environment. What does auditability involve? Compliance to procedures and process is exponentially increasing, with several regulations binding application development throughout its life cycle today. Understanding the types of information auditors look for as evidences of what happened carries a long way in how decisions are made, who made, when they were made, and so on. Sometimes these auditability should be at the level for even rolling out deployed changes impacting the cost of quality. Auditability should augment the version control and source code control practices within each project artifacts. So what are some of those auditability requirements 101? At the process level, it ensures that proactive controls are in place. Competencies and capabilities of tools and people are evaluated to deliver the proper output. It reviews the integrity of results as they are achieved, and it incorporates measures and metrics to assess effectiveness and efficiency. It doesn't stop at the process level, it moves into the next level called procedure audit. And the procedure audit confirms what tasks are being performed. It establishes standard operating procedures for following processes. It verifies decision-making authority on work packages delivered, and it ensures that training and documentation is in place to perform the task necessary. As we come to the end, services or operations, what do they mean? When delivering a software, think of the following. Can the customer service field the request from the customers and end users in the production environment? Can the service operations sustain the application in the production environment? Now, when you ask these questions, some of these operations may actually be creating requirements around event management, incident management, application management, and access management. This is not a complete list, but just some of those operations. A good application development lifecycle tool should therefore enable all these 5 principles that we discussed. Now it's demo time, and let's switch into SpiraTeam and show some elements of how these 5 principles are supported. This is SpiraTeam at this point. You have accessed my cloud instance at this point. Now when you look at the very top, you have a lot of information. So at the very top you have the planning, and underneath that you have requirements. So when you look at the actual requirements for a particular project, you see a lot of requirements around things that are coming up over here. So when you look at each and every one of those things, I'm going to click on something randomly. So some of these things, so all these things are hierarchical in nature, and so we are looking at this. So right from the requirements, I'm able to actually tie to a test case. What are the test cases this requirement is mapped to? That information is right there, so you are able to see the traceability between requirements and test cases. And when you do the same thing from the test cases perspective, and I'm going to click on something over here. Right from the test cases, this is the test case. From there, I'm able to see the requirements coverage. So it is very easily showing what the bidirectional flow between requirements and test cases. Okay, so it shows that information. And Spira's terminology for defects or deviations from the requirements is the incident at this point. And there are different types of incidences, but for now we'll focus on that. And these are the incidences, and these incidences are also mapped right at the test case level. So what test cases were executed, and those are shown in test runs. And from there we will be able to find out what are the defects that were logged, and you are able to see the defects, the test cases, the requirements, everything there. So all the different project artifacts are all properly linked. And you can also see that under the planning of the requirements, if I bring up that, right from there you are able to see the tasks. So task tells you what are all the different activities that were actually done in order for me to meet these requirements. Now if I go into any one of those things, I can do this for every artifact, but I'm going to pick up one of this, or a task I have picked. And when I picked up a particular element, So let me go to the requirements because we are talking in the requirements. When I take a look at these requirements, you can see, I'm having, requirements that is actually returned, and then, it is passed to Fred, and Fred reviewed and provided some feedback, and Joe actually commented on this, telling like, we need to have a better definition. And then, Fred made some changes, and actually, that looks much better. So you see there is an auditability. This auditability basically tells like who did what, when, why, and all those information is there. So we are able to see the traceability, we are able to see the auditability. Okay. And let me also show you the element over here. Here you see the source code control. So when you are looking at the source code, you are able to tie to any one of the two tools that you already have in place, so that you are able to establish that connection. Say Subversion has a source code control. You are able to do all the monitoring of what different files were checked out and checked in. So you are able to do that building of the source code management and version code management as a result of building the software here. You also have, under the testing, you have automation host. The automation host would be the one that would be used for how you go about testing with different interfaces. And when you look at a specific test cases, for instance, as you are writing the test cases themselves, I'll pick up this. As you pick up the test case is listed there, and all the different test steps that need to be part of that is listed over there. And then comes the automation. So depending upon whether you already are having a small test script that is written, you can drop the test script over here, or you can actually link it to a file automation test script that is already available in some repository. You can link all these things. So you can configure the parameters that needs to come with this. So all this information is properly tied. So you are able to see the engineering aspects of it. You are able to see the traceability and the auditability, all those elements of this. Now let me show you the governance aspect of it. So when you come into the administration element of the thing, you will see that there is something called a workflow. Okay, so requirements for workflow. Let me pick up that. And I'm going to click on the default workflow at this point. When I click on the steps, it shows me what's the process by which I am actually taking these requirements through its requirement lifecycle. So as I actually write one particular requirement, it goes through, I'm requesting a requirement, it's in the initial stage. As it goes through, I either accept the requirement, or I consider it duplicate, or I review the requirement. And when it goes to the review the requirement, it goes under the under review state. And when you come into the under review state, I can still review it and make sure that it is correct and accept the requirements or rejected. If it is rejected, I can return it to review for making it a little better. It goes through the cycle. So this is a cycle that I have created, a workflow that I have created to make sure that the requirements that I am building is solid, that it has gone through additional people's review, test cases are considered, requirements are actually bolstered with specific actors in mind or persona in mind, depending upon the framework of choice that you use, whether you use a use case to develop it or user story to develop it. So all those requirements are properly baked in as you are taking these requirements through its life cycle, and finally consider it as developed, tested, and deployed. So this is a process that you can actually do, and this workflow exists for how you do the planning, how you do the testing, and all these things exist. And this particular tool provides the interface completely on all these elements. So as you can see from this quick demo, you are able to actually come back and check into all these elements that I talked about. Okay. So in summary, an application lifecycle management should support the 5 principles. It's governance, traceability, development, auditability, and operation or services. And then specific features should support framework agnostic business processes, whether it is requirements management, estimation processes, source code or version code control management, quality procedures, deployment, collaboration, and transition and succession planning. The application tool should support all these principles. So I call this a stage approach, and that stage approach basically is focusing on services, traceability, auditability, governance, and engineering excellence. Thank you very much for attending this webinar, and we will see you in the next webinar soon.